All right, now we're going to look at the second part of lesson 10.1, and we're going to talk about what's called the measures of central tendency. Now, once I get all of that information, so remember I either do a population, everyone in that category, or a sample, just a certain amount of people in that category, and I get all that information. Let's say I collected all the information about the heights of people at Heritage Baptist Academy, or all the information about how many kittens each student has, or in California, the income of everybody or a sample of people in California. Once I have all those numbers aren't going to help me unless I make sense of them. So what we do is we use what we call measures of central tendency, and these measures help us make sense of those numbers so then we can use those for something. Let's say you have a bakery and you want to find out how many you collect all throughout the day, how many what each person paid for what they bought. And at the end of the day, you have all of these numbers. This person paid this much, this person paid this much, this person paid this much, but you want to use that information to help you run your bakery better. So how do you do that? Well, there are 4 measures of central tendency that help us. So before we can use our measures of central tendency, the first thing you always have to do, and I have to emphasize this because if you do not do this, you will get all of the problems wrong. So please, I'm begging you, please do this first before anything else, and that is put them in order from least to greatest. You have to do that first. So always, before you do anything else, take your numbers and put them in order from least to greatest. Now, there are 4 numbers of central tendency. The first is what we call the range. The range is very simple. All you do with the range is take your biggest number and then subtract your smallest number. Again, if you put them in order from least to greatest, that should be very easy. So let's look at a group of numbers here. I have 6, 9, 7, 3, 6, 7, 10, 5. So what do? First, put them in order, least to greatest. So I'm going to do that quickly here. So the first thing I do is I put them in order from least to greatest. When I do that, I end up with this. 3, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 9, and 10. So now I have them in order from least to greatest. Now I can find my range. Again, in this case, don't do it like we did last time where you don't include numbers twice. Here you have to include every time a number occurs. So since I have 2 6s, I have to write both 6s. Since I have 2 7s, I have to write both 7s. So make sure you write not only all the numbers, but every time they occur, write them every time they occur. So I'm going to take my biggest number, which is 10, and subtract my smallest number, which is 3, and I get my range, which is going to be 7. So what my range does is it gives me an idea of, are these numbers close together, or are all these numbers really far apart? That's the idea of the range. So that gives me from my biggest number minus my smallest number. The second one is my mean. My mean is just another word for average. So what I do for my mean is I'm going to add up all my numbers and then divide by how many numbers I have. So in this case, I would add all these numbers up. When I do that, I would end up with 53. So I add 3 plus 5 plus 6 plus 6 plus 7 plus 9 plus 10. That's going to equal 53. Then I'm going to count how many numbers do I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers. So I'm going to divide by 8. I add up all my numbers and I divide by how many I have. 53 divided by 8, and I get 6.6. So many times you will get a decimal for your mean. So your mean is 6.6. When you get your decimal, make sure you round to the 10th. So with your mean, if it keeps going, round to the 10th place. Or that's this place right here. So I get 6.6 in this case. Next is my median. What is my median? My median is my middle number. Again, make sure they're in order from least to greatest. Then you can have your middle number. Now, for the middle number, sometimes you will have 2 middle numbers. So if you have an odd number of numbers, then you will only have one number in the middle. Say, for example, if I have 9, well, I'll have 4, 4, and then one number in the middle. Whatever number is in the middle, that's your middle number. But if you have an even number of numbers, like we have here, we have 8, then we're going to have two numbers in the middle. So notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is my middle. So I have 6 and 7 are both in the middle. So if you have two numbers in the middle, you have to add up those two numbers and then divide by 2. So I'm going to do 6 plus 7 is 13. Divided by 2 is 6.5. So my median is 6.5. So since I had an even number of numbers, then I have two numbers in the middle. I have to add them up and divide by 2. Finally, I have my mode. My mode is simply the one that occurs the most. The most common is my mode. So my mode is the one that's the most common. So in this case, notice 6 occurs twice and 7 occurs twice. So since they both occur twice, I actually have two modes. So my mode is 6 and 7. So it's always the number that occurs the most. Now, the mode is unique. For every other one of these numbers, the range, the mean, and the median, you will always only have one of those. You can never have two means. You can never have two modes. Remember, if you have two, you can never have two medians. Remember, if you have two medians, you have to add them and divide by 2. You can never have two ranges. You can only have one range. So for every single one of those, you always have one. But for your mode, like here, you can have 2. You can have 1. Or sometimes you can have 0. If every number only occurs once, then your mode is none. Don't put 0, because it's not the number 0. It's none. So if every number only occurs once, your mode is none. Not 0, because 0 is a number. It's none. If you have only one number that occurs more than every other number, then it's that number as your mode. If you have more than one number that occurs the most, then that is, you have two modes. So let's look at one more example of how we would do this, and then we'll let you go. So we have here 58, 38, 60, 44, 45, 42, 49, 50, and 41. Again, first step, what's my first step? Has to be in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to put that in order from least to greatest really quickly here. So I have 38, 41, 42, 44, 45, 49, 50, 58, and 60. I put that in order from least to greatest. What's my next? Now, I have to find my four things. My first is my range. How do I find my range? Once I have it in order, it's easy now. Take my biggest number, which is 60, and subtract my smallest number, which is 38, and I get a range of 22. How about my mean? Remember, my mean is my average. So I have to add up all of these numbers. When I add them all up, that equals 427. And then I'm going to divide by how many numbers I have. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to do 427 divided by 9. Remember, round to the 10th if I need to. So I get 47.4. That is my mean. Now, for your mean, you should always get a number that is somewhere around the middle of the rest of your numbers. So notice I have 38, 40, all the way up to 60. If you got a mean of 80, that's impossible, because that's not the average of these numbers. If you got a mean of 20, that's impossible. Your mean should be somewhere around the middle of the numbers. So if you don't get a mean that's around the middle, double check your work. You did something wrong. Next, we have our median. Remember, our median is our middle number. If I have an even number of numbers, then I'm going to have two middle numbers, so I have to add them together and divide by 2. But here, remember, I have 9 numbers, so I'm not going to have two numbers in the middle. I'm just going to have one. Since I have 9, 9 divided by 2 is 4.5, so I have 4 here and 4 here. So my middle number is 45. There's only one middle number, so my median is 45. So if there's an odd number of numbers, you're only going to have one number in the middle, so that is your median. You don't have to do anything else. It's easy. If there's an even number, you're going to have two numbers in the middle. So you have to add them together and divide by 2. Finally, my mode. Remember, my mode is the one that occurs the most. Do any of these numbers occur more than once? No, they all only occur once. Since none of them occurs more than once, I do not have a mode. Don't put 0, because there is no number 0 here. I'm going to put none. None, because there is no mode. The mode is not 0. 0 is a number. My mode, I do not have a mode, so I put the mode as none. One last thing, and then I'll let you go. Sometimes what they will give you is they will give you some numbers, and then they will leave out a number, and then they'll give you your mean. And they'll want you to figure out what that missing number is. To do that, we have to remember how we figure out the mean. I figure out the mean by adding up all my numbers and dividing by how many I have. So in this case, I have 7, 11, 15, and x. So I'm going to add 7 plus 11 plus 15 plus x. And then I'm going to divide by how many numbers I have. I have 1, 2, 3. The x is a number, so that's 4. So I'm going to divide by 4, and that equals my mean, which it tells me is 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up all my numbers and my variable and divide by how many numbers, including the variable, there are. Now to figure out what that x is, the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate my variable. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. So I'm going to multiply by my mean by how many numbers I have, not including the mean. So now I have 7 plus 11 plus 15 plus x equals 48. Notice my 4 is canceled, so now I don't have a denominator. Now all I have to do is isolate my variable. So I can do 18 plus 15. Add those together. That gives me 33 plus x equals 48. Then I can subtract to isolate my variable. So my last number is 15. So the answer to that would have been 15. I can check it by adding it to 7, 11, and 15 and dividing by 4, and it should equal 12. So that is how you would do that type of problem. I hope that helps.